When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It wasn't even a smile of strength. It was the simple, quiet curve of the lips that happens when your heart finally accepts what your mind has known for a long, long time. I looked at her standing there in the doorway of what used to be my kitchen. She was holding my own grandson on her hip, a child I had rocked to sleep almost every night for a year. And her words were clear, calm, and final. "Mother," she said. Not Mom. The way she used to call me when she first came into our family, all bright eyes and hope. Now it was just Mother. A title. A distance. "Mother, we think it's time you had your own space again. We've found a nice little apartment for you. It will be better for everyone." Better for everyone. I let those words sit in the quiet air between us. I looked past her, into the living room where my husband, David, sat in his favorite armchair. He was staring at the television, but I knew he wasn't seeing it. His shoulders were hunched, a silent fortress. He did not turn. He did not speak. He did not meet my eyes. In that stillness, I heard the echo of a promise made 43 years ago under a different sky. A promise that had now faded, like old ink on a page left in the sun. I nodded slowly. I smiled that thin, empty smile. And I said, "Okay, I'll start packing." The greatest pain wasn't being asked to leave my home. It was looking at the man for whom I had given up my entire world, and realizing he had forgotten its worth, and my name is Eleanor. For most of my life, I was David's wife. Before that, I was a girl who dreamed of colors. I wanted to be a textile designer. I would spend hours in the library, sketching patterns inspired by the garden behind our small house, the deep purple of irises, the vibrant green of new leaves, the soft blush of cherry blossoms. I had a scholarship to a good art school in the city. It was a world away from my small town. A world of possibility that shimmered just within my reach. Then, at a friend's wedding, I met David. He wasn't the loudest in a room. He was quiet, with a steady kind of presence. He was a young engineer, practical, grounded. He asked me what I was drawing in the little notebook I carried. When I showed him, he didn't just say pretty. He asked, "What does this color feel like to you?" No one had ever asked me that. To me, color had a heartbeat, a temperature, a sound. He listened. He really listened. We fell in love simply, deeply. His world was one of blueprints and calculations. Mine was of hues and textures. Together, we felt complete. When he was offered a brilliant job overseas, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, he came to me, his eyes alight. "It's for 3 years, maybe 5, he said, holding my hands. "Come with me. We'll build a life there. It's an adventure." My heart did a funny little flip-flop. My scholarship, my designs, my city, they were all here. I saw the worry flicker in his eyes. He whispered, "I can't do this without you. You're my home, Ellie." That word, home. He was asking me to be his home in a strange land. And I wanted to be that for him. More than I wanted anything else. I let the scholarship go. I packed my dreams into a single trunk, folding them carefully between sheets of tissue paper, believing it was just a pause. A detour. Love was the journey now. We moved across the ocean. The new country was beautiful, but lonely. The language was a barrier. The friends were his colleagues first. My world shrank to the walls of our apartment. I tried to find work, but my qualifications didn't translate. My portfolio seemed childish here. So I did what I believed a good wife did. I made our house a home. I learned to cook the local dishes. I made sure his shirts were perfectly pressed, his dinner warm no matter how late he worked. I welcomed his friends. I smiled when I was lonely. I wrote long letters to my family, always saying how wonderful everything was. Our son, Michael, was born 2 years later. He became my new world, my living, breathing creation. My love for David deepened, watching him become a father. He was a good provider. He was proud. He would come home, lift Michael high, and say, "Look at my boy." Life had a rhythm. Wake, care, cook, clean, sleep. My sketchbook gathered dust on the top shelf of the wardrobe. Sometimes, On quiet afternoons with Michael napping, I would take it down. I'd run my fingers over the half-finished patterns. But the colors felt muted now, the lines hesitant. It was like looking at the handwriting of a stranger. Years folded into one another. We never moved back. The 3-year plan stretched into 5, then 10, then forever. David's career flourished. He built bridges, literal ones, strong and soaring. I built a life around him, invisible supports holding everything up. Michael grew up, went to university, fell in love with a smart, spirited girl named Sarah. When they married, I felt a surge of old joy. A new beginning. I whispered to David at the reception, "Our family is growing." He squeezed my hand and smiled. It felt like a promise renewed. When little Leo was born, Sarah and Michael asked for help. They were both starting demanding careers. "Just for a few months, Mom," Michael said, "until Sarah gets back on her feet." Of course, I said yes. David was semi-retired now, more often home. We moved into their spare room, a temporary arrangement. I poured all the love I had into that baby. The late-night feeds, the soothing songs, the first giggles, they were my sunrise and sunset. David would play with Leo for a few minutes, then retreat to his chair. With the newspaper, "You spoil him," he'd say gently, watching me rock Leo for too long. But I saw the way he looked at us. I thought it was contentment. I thought, this is our reward. This quiet, shared autumn. I was so busy loving them all, I didn't notice the silence growing between David and me. We talked about the baby, about the weather, about what to have for dinner. We didn't talk about the quiet ache in my hands that sometimes longed to hold a pencil, or the strange emptiness of a house that wasn't ours, or the future that seemed to be shrinking, not expanding. We were a team, I believed. We had built this life together. But I was starting to feel like the foundation, buried so deep no one remembered the shape of the stones. The first crack was so small, I almost missed it. It was a Thursday. I had just put Leo down for his nap. My back ached from bending over his crib. I walked into the living room, hoping for a cup of tea and 5 minutes of quiet. David and Sarah were at the table, looking at a laptop screen. They were laughing about something. "What's so funny?" I asked, smiling as I filled the kettle. "Oh, Sarah found this hilarious video of a cat," David said, not looking up. But I saw the screen. It wasn't a cat video. It was a real estate listing. A sleek, modern apartment. I felt a cold trickle in my stomach. "Looking at places?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Sarah glanced at David quickly, then closed the laptop. "Just dreaming, Mother. You know, for someday. A place with less stairs for when Leo starts running." She laughed, but it sounded tight. "Good idea," David said, finally looking at me. "Always good to plan ahead." I nodded and took my tea to the small balcony. Plan ahead. The words felt heavy. Were they planning for their future, or for ours? I shook the thought away. I was being silly, paranoid, but the small things began to pile up, like leaves before a storm. Sarah started making comments, always wrapped in concern. "Mother, you work too hard with Leo. Let me put him to bed tonight. And then, this house is too much for you to clean. We're hiring a maid." Each time, it felt like a piece of my purpose here was being gently, kindly taken away. I was being retired from my own role. One evening, I overheard a conversation from the kitchen. I was in the hallway, about to walk in. Sarah's voice was low but clear. "David, I just think she's getting tired. She forgot to give Leo his vitamin drops twice this week. At her age, this is a lot." There was a pause. Then David's voice, tired, resigned. "I know. She's not as sharp as she used to be." I stood frozen. Not as sharp. The words cut deep. I hadn't forgotten the drops. The bottle had been empty, and I'd told Sarah we needed more. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger. But more than that, I felt a bewildering sense of injustice. David. My David. He was agreeing with her. I walked in then, my face carefully blank. The conversation stopped. "Leo's asleep," I said. "I'm going to bed early. My back is sore." I didn't look at David. He just said, "All right, dear. Rest well." That dear felt like a dismissal. The distance between David and me became a physical space in the house. He spent more time in the study or helping Michael in the garage. Our conversations were polite, but empty. We were two satellites orbiting the same family but no longer in sync. One night, lying side by side in the dark, the chasm between our pillows felt miles wide. "David," I whispered into the darkness. "Do you ever think about going back? Just for a visit?" A long sigh. "Back where, Ellie?" "Home. Our home country. See the old places." "That's not home anymore, Ellie," he said, his voice thick with sleep or irritation. "This is home. Our life is here. With Michael and Leo. Don't be sentimental." Sentimental. My memories, my youth, my sacrificed dreams. Reduced to sentiment. A tear traced a hot path down my temple and into my hair.
He was already
snoring softly. Then came the day of the family dinner. Sarah's parents were visiting. I had spent all day cooking, wanting to make a good impression, to feel useful. I made my special roast, the one David always bragged about to his friends. The table was set beautifully. Everyone was laughing, talking over each other. Leo was in his high chair, banging a spoon. Sarah's father, a jovial man, turned to David. "You're a lucky man, David. Retired, son doing well, a grandson to carry on the name. And Eleanor here keeping everyone fed and happy. The perfect support system." David raised his wine glass, a wide, contented smile on his face. "I am lucky," he said. "It all worked out just as I'd planned. A good career, a family in a great country. Smooth sailing."
smooth sailing.
The words landed in the center of my chest and stayed there, cold and hard. I looked at my plate. The vibrant green of the peas, the rich brown of the gravy. They just looked like mush. All the turbulence, the loneliness, the quiet struggles of building a life in foreign soil, the scholarship gathering dust, the years of pressing shirts and swallowing my words, all of it, to him, was just smooth sailing. A planned route executed well.
My part in it was just the support system.
Like the favorable wind he'd expected to find. I didn't speak for the rest of the meal. No one noticed. The laughter flowed around me. I was the quiet current underneath, unseen, carrying everything forward. That night, as I washed the dishes, the hot water stung my hands. I looked out the black kitchen window and saw my own reflection, a woman with kind eyes, tired lines, and an invisible weight on her shoulders. I saw the ghost of the girl with a sketchbook standing behind me. She looked confused. She looked lost. A week after that dinner, the air in the house changed. It became formal, careful. Sarah was especially kind, which set my nerves on edge. She'd bring me tea, without asking. She'd say, "You sit, mother, I'll
get that."
It felt less like kindness and more like rehearsal. David became quieter, almost evasive. He'd take long walks and come back, without saying where he'd been. One afternoon, I found a brochure on the coffee table. Silver Haven Residences. Independent living for your golden years. The photo showed a smiling, gray-haired couple playing cards in a sunlit, impersonal lounge. My heart began to pound, a slow, sickening rhythm. I picked it up and went to find David. He was in the study, paying bills online. I placed the brochure on the desk next to the mouse. I didn't say anything. He looked at it, then at me. His face went through a series of movements, surprise, guilt, then a forced calm.
"Oh, that."
Sarah picked that up. She thought we should explore options. Options for what, David? My voice was barely a whisper. For the future, Ellie. We're not getting any younger. This house, the stairs, looking after Leo, it's a lot. I am looking after Leo just fine, I said, my voice gaining a little strength.
And we?
Is this a we decision? Because you haven't talked to me about it. He swiveled his chair away from the computer, rubbing his forehead. I'm talking to you now. Look, be reasonable. Michael and Sarah need their space back.
They're a young family.
And we could have a place of our own again.
No chores, no noise.
It would be easier. A place of our own? I echoed, pointing to the brochure. That looks like a waiting room for the end of life, David. That is not a home. And since when did our son's noise become a burden to you? You used to love the chaos. That was before, he said, a flash of frustration in his eyes. Before it became every single day. Ellie, things change. We have to adapt. I've adapted my whole life. The room went very still. The air felt thin. I've adapted my whole life. You've adapted? The words left my lips slowly, each one heavy and deliberate. David, look at me. Look at my life. I left everything. My country, my family, my chance to be something for myself. I adapted until Eleanor was just the wife. The mother. The grandmother. The support system for your smooth sailing. He looked pained, but it was the pain of being confronted, not of understanding. Don't do that, he said, shaking his head. Don't rewrite history. You wanted to come. You were happy to build a life with me. It was a partnership. It was a partnership. I cried, the tears finally breaking through. But partners see each other's contributions. Partners remember the cost.
Do you?
Do you ever for 1 minute think about what I gave up? Or did it just become the convenient background for the life you planned? He stood up, his chair scraping loudly. This is exactly what I mean.
Drama.
Sentiment. Everything is a sacrifice with you lately. Can't you just be happy with what we have? A beautiful family. A comfortable life. What more did you want? I stared at him. I searched his face, the face I had loved for a lifetime, for a glimmer of recognition. For a memory of the girl who talked about color having sound. There was nothing there. Just annoyance and a deep, weary desire for peace, a peace that clearly didn't include my complicated feelings. In that moment, the love didn't disappear. It just changed shape. It hardened into a crystal clear, agonizing truth. He truly did not know. He had forgotten. Not the facts, but the weight of them. The emotional cost had been mine alone to carry, and now it was too heavy for him to even look at. What more did I want? I repeated softly. I didn't have an answer. He would understand. I just wanted to be seen. And I never would be. I left the room. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, with a finality that scared me. The turning point wasn't a loud argument. It was that quiet click of the latch. It was the realization that the man on the other side of the door lived in a different story than I did. In his story, my sacrifices were just the plot points that led to his happy ending. In my story, they were the chapters where the main character slowly faded from view. The next few days were a silent play. We moved around each other, polite and hollow. Then, one morning, Sarah cornered me in the kitchen after David had gone for his walk. Leo was at playgroup. The house was terribly quiet. Mother, she began, her hands clasped tightly. We need to talk about the future. And she laid it out. The nice little apartment they'd already put a deposit on. How it was closer to a good market and a clinic. How it would be safer. How it was time. Her words were a well-rehearsed script of concern and practicality. When she finished, she looked at me, waiting for the tears, the protest. That's when I smiled. That empty, accepting smile. I looked past her, to the living room where David's chair sat. He had chosen his side. He had chosen the path of least resistance, the smooth sail. He had forgotten the worth of the anchor that had held him steady through every storm. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll start packing. Packing a lifetime into boxes is a strange kind of archaeology. You don't find treasure. You find ghosts. I found the trunk. The one I'd brought over the ocean 4 decades ago. The dust made me cough as I dragged it out from the back of the storage closet. My hands trembled as I opened the latches. The faint, familiar scent of camphor and old paper wafted out. There, on top, wrapped in tissue, was my old sketchbook. Beneath it, a few letters from my mother, the handwriting now a precious relic. A pressed flower from my parents' garden. A postcard of the art school I never attended. I sat on the floor of the spare room, my legs numb, and opened the sketchbook. The girl who looked back at me from those pages was all bold lines and swirling, confident color. a pattern of wild, interconnected vines, a geometric design inspired by city windows, a watery, abstract piece titled Homesick. I'd drawn that one during my first lonely winter here. I traced the lines with a finger. The grief was no longer sharp. It was a deep, resonant ache, like an old bone that knows the rain is coming. That I heard a soft knock. Michael stood in the doorway, his face a mask of guilt and sorrow. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. He came in and sat on the floor beside me, like he did when he was a little boy, with a scraped knee. He saw the open sketchbook. I never knew you could draw like this." I gave a small shrug. It was a long time ago. "Sarah?" "She means well," he started, but the words sounded weak even to him. "She thinks it's for the best. Dad thinks so too. They say you'll be less stressed." "What do you think, Michael?" I asked, looking directly at him. He couldn't hold my gaze. He looked at the drawing of the vines. "I think I've gotten used to you being here, taking care of everything. Of Leo. I don't know how we'll manage." He paused. "But Dad says it's not fair to you anymore." A bittersweet laugh escaped me. "He's right about that. It isn't fair, but not in the way he means." I closed the sketchbook. "I'll be all right, Michael. You'll manage just fine. You have your own family to build." He hugged me then, a tight, desperate hug. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, my boy." That was the only real goodbye I got. David helped me move the boxes to the new apartment. It was nice. Small, clean, bright. It smelled of new paint and emptiness. He was awkward, bustling about, putting boxes in the right rooms. He wouldn't stop talking. "See, Ellie, look at this view. And the bathroom has grip bars. Very safe." I just watched him. This man who is now a nervous stranger in my new, silent space. When the last box was in, he stood in the middle of the living room, hands in his pockets. "Well," he said, "I should let you settle in." "David," I said. He turned, hopeful, maybe for a smile, for things to go back to normal. "I need you to do one thing for me." "Anything, Ellie. Go home. And in that quiet house, I want you to sit in your chair. And for just 1 hour, I want you to try to remember my life. Not as your wife. Not as Michael's mother. But as Eleanor. The girl on the boat who was scared. The young woman who was lonely. The artist who put her pencils away. Try to see it. Not as a story about you, but as a story about me. If you can do that, then maybe someday we can talk." He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He looked old and confused and terribly sad. He nodded, a slow, mechanical movement. Then he turned and left. The door closed with that same soft, final click. Alone, the silence was immense. It wasn't peaceful. It was roaring. I unpacked the kettle and made tea. I placed the sketchbook on the empty coffee table. I put the postcard of the art school on the fridge with a magnet. The first night was the longest of my life. But with the sunrise, something shifted. The silence began to change. It was no longer an absence of their noise. It was a presence. My own presence. For the first time in over 40 years, I was in a space where no one needed me to be anything. I wasn't the support system. I was just me, whoever that was. Weeks passed. Michael visited with Leo. It was joyful and painful. When they left, the quiet felt different. It felt like my quiet. David called. His voice was hesitant. He talked about the weather, about Michael. He never mentioned the hour in the chair. I didn't ask. One rainy afternoon, I was looking out at the gray sky. My eyes fell on the sketchbook. A strange impulse took hold. I went to a small shop and bought a cheap set of pencils and some paper. Not the beautiful, thick paper of my youth. Just simple printer paper. I sat at my small table. I looked at the rain tracing paths down the window. And I began to draw. Not a grand design. Just the lines of the window pane. The blur of the world outside. My lines were shaky, uncertain. The drawing was terrible. But I kept going. I drew the teacup on the table. I drew the shadow of the chair. I was not an artist again. That ship had sailed. but I was a woman drawing. And in that simple act, I was reclaiming something. Not my lost career, but my right to try. My right to create something, however small, for no one's benefit but my own. The forgiveness, when it began to come, was not for David. Not yet. It was for myself. I forgave the young girl for being so brave and so foolish. I forgave the young wife for believing love was enough to fill every empty space. I forgave the mother for losing herself in the beautiful chaos of her family. I started to piece together a new story where Eleanor was not just a supporting character, but someone who had lived, loved, lost, and was still here. It's been a year now. The apartment feels like home. My drawings are stuck on the fridge, next to Leo's finger paintings. They're still not good, but they are mine. David and I have a quiet, careful friendship. We have tea once a week. We talk about Leo, about old movies. We don't talk about the past. Maybe we never will. The bridge between our memories is broken, and some things cannot be rebuilt. But we can sit on opposite banks and wave, and that is a kind of peace. Sometimes, when I see him looking at Leo with such uncomplicated love, I feel a pang. He is a good grandfather. He just forgot how to be a partner to the grandmother. The lesson I've learned in this quiet season of my life is not a loud one. It's a whisper. It's this: love is not a ledger. You cannot spend years adding up your sacrifices and waiting for the other person to acknowledge the sum. They might never see it. Their story is their own. The truest love, perhaps, is given without the expectation of being remembered as a hero in someone else's tale. And this is the most important part, but you must never forget the value of your own story. You must tend to the garden of your own soul, even if it's just a small window box. You must remember your own name, even when everyone else only calls you by your roles. My pain was not in loving David. My pain was in loving him so much that I let myself disappear, and then hoping he would notice I was gone. He didn't. He just got used to the empty space where I used to be. Now I am filling that space again. With the sound of my own thoughts. With bad drawings. With the quiet joy of a morning that belongs entirely to me. The love I have for my family hasn't lessened. It just exists alongside a new, fragile love for the woman I am rediscovering. So, if you are listening to this and you see yourself in my story, the one who always adjusts, who always steps back, who holds everything together with quiet hands, please hear this. Do not wait for a thank you that may never come. Do not wait for someone to remember your sacrifice. Start, today, to remember yourself. Pick up your old sketchbook. Hum your forgotten song. It's never too late to turn the page and begin a new chapter. One where you are both the author and the main character.
It is a quiet life now.
But it is mine. And in its own way, after all the storms, it is finally smooth sailing.